Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy McDonald, and this is another one of my series of interviews with subject matter experts with people from throughout the country talking about college admissions. And today I have with me Michael Davila. Michael is a financial and educational consultant from Texas. He is the owner of College Inroads. Michael, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks for having me here. Great to see you.
So Mike, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure.
What brought you to what you're doing right now?
Oh, yeah, you bet. This is kind of a random story, Cindy. I first got started in higher educational stuff back when I was on active duty as a military officer. I had attended Annapolis, and during my active duty time, I was invited to go back and teach at Annapolis for a couple of years while I was on active duty. And so when that opportunity came up, I said, absolutely, I would love to go back and try my hand at teaching. And at first I was absolutely petrified. You know, I had never done teaching in my life. I had no real formal training in it, but I was teaching naval strategy and tactics, which I'd been trained in, and also seamanship and navigation through the Department of Professional Development there. And when I was there, I also had an opportunity to be on the faculty senate of the Naval Academy, which is a mixture of both civilian and military faculty. So it was really a fascinating time to see how strategic plans were brought about, to see how faculty could fight over parking spaces. You know, it was anything and everything during that period of time that kind of got me into the thought process about higher education. When I was there at Annapolis, I was recruited by Merrill Lynch to leave the military and become a financial advisor. And so I decided at the end of the roaring 90s that it would be an absolutely great time to become a financial advisor. So I did all the testing for that. I got trained and left and came to Texas to start that new career. And that was, oh gosh, at the end of 2000, right before 9/11, right before the market crashed. So I was there at Merrill Lynch for about 2 years and then realized, wow, this is just not, this wasn't the cup of tea that I was hoping for. And through a couple of different contacts at church, of all places, I came upon a person who owned basically what I would call a financial aid advising firm. So I did that for a number of years. And through that process, I realized, wow, financial aid is really great. There's a lot that we can do to help families on that front. But really, I started to field a lot of questions from parents about academic stuff, the resume and how to prepare for interviews and blah, 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 all these other things. So in 2006 or 7, I went back to the University of Texas for a master's degree in higher educational administration. And so I wanted to get some grounding. How do we do this? What are the things that are of concern to administrators at colleges at that point in time? So finished up that master's, and really when I was there, I did a lot of research, and a lot of my papers and things were on strategic enrollment management, our topic of today. So my own firm, College Inroads, has been around since 2009. I can't believe that. The time has flown. And today, we help students throughout Texas, and, we have some remote clients as well. So it's really a lot of fun. I love doing what we do.
You bring up a really good point, because it is very much a holistic process. You can't have one without the other. And
Right.
And that's how I ended up in this too, because I started doing financial aid consulting and then realized, well, you've got to get them in, and how do you do that? So
Absolutely.
it really, they go hand in hand.
Totally.
So I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to do the financial aid, but I don't know how you can do one without the other, especially now.
It's really interesting, Cindy, because over the last few years, and I know everyone's clientele is different, and if you're at a public school, you're not necessarily getting into the weeds in terms of people's finances and such. In actuality, I'm not a financial advisor anymore. I let go of my licenses and stuff, so I don't sell products or anything like that. But to understand the world of college affordability, I think is really impactful on families, and especially students who they're going through this whole thing by themselves in some cases, or they're going based on the advice of their peers, and they don't quite understand, what is the budget for college? What is this whole thing going to cost me? Well, I need to take out student loans. How much are those going to amount to? What will the payment options be when I'm done? Some 16, 17-year-olds are not thinking about those things, right, Cindy? I mean, and this is where the discussions that I think IECs and school counselors have with families, not just students, but the whole family, become really invaluable in the planning process.
So you mentioned something, you mentioned the word strategic enrollment management and how you study that at the university. Can you expound on that a little bit? What does that mean?
What does that mean? Okay, so that I don't leave anything out, Cindy, I'm actually going to read a definition. So bear with me here for a second. And this comes straight from Wikipedia, the not really scholarly source, but it's, I think, a really great way to encapsulate really what SEM is. Okay, so essentially, strategic enrollment management really is a dynamic task that begins with an understanding of the world around the college. Okay, how much does it cost to buy energy for the University of Texas at Austin? That is something that, VP level folks are really having to come to terms with as they make their budgets. Anticipating changes. For example, student demography in the United States. Which states are having fewer and fewer numbers of 18-year-old, traditional age college students, graduating from their high schools? Which ones are burgeoning? All of these things are needing to be taken into account. It probes institutional missions and goals. So in other words, as the executive committees and boards of colleges are thinking about what they want to shape their institution into in the future, they're really having to look at the mission. Are we trying to bring in many more, students of color, or first generation students that are full pay, whatever the case may be. It's really going back to institutional missions and goals. Modifying those things as necessary and coordinating campus-wide efforts in such areas as marketing, student recruitment and retention, tuition pricing, financial aid, academic and career counseling, and curriculum reform. This is really broad. This is a huge area. That's the reason why I think the word strategic is put on the front of that. Whereas enrollment management, without that whole strategic, piece in front, is a task of setting and meeting a goal of assembling a student body that comprises a predetermined and advantageous mix of students in terms of quality, number, gender, diversity, and its form. So you can see that the strategic piece is reaching across campus now, so that marketing is affected, retention is looked at, academic programming and the quality of that is really being paid attention to, so that they can have a stronger institution going forward. How's that? That was a big, long answer.
So how does that translate into what our students and parents need to do? So and I think this is something that now it's kind of burst a bubble. It was like, okay, I'm this student. It doesn't matter where I'm coming from or what I'm doing. I want to come to your university. How do I show you what I have to bring? How does strategic enrollment management come into that?
Yeah, how does that intersect? I mean, that's a great question, Cindy, because it really matters what type of institution we're looking at. Okay, so what I mean by that is this. If we're looking at Ivy and upper tier 1 institutions, strategic enrollment management is not something that they've traditionally had to deal with, right? Because they have the law of supply and demand on their side, okay? But once we, kind of come down just a hair's breadth from that upper, echelon of schools, once we get down just underneath that, these are colleges that are, somewhat a little bit more tuition driven. They don't have quite the endowment. They have to be much more thoughtful and intentional about who they bring into their institution. So I think just the knowledge, to answer your question directly, I think the knowledge that these systems are out there at the consumer level makes them much more of a powerful consumer of higher education. We as IECs or as school counselors, knowing that these colleges are operating much more intentionally, operating as businesses, I think is a really good way, a good cognitive map, a good way of thinking about this, which means, we don't just dump in willy-nilly applications to the schools that the kiddos' peers are applying to. We have to look at the student and their family kind of as a unit to say, what are their values? What types of resources do they have? What types of abilities did the student, bring? Because it's, to me, in my mind, Cindy, the whole family is going to college now. And I think you see this with orientation sessions that have students and parents there for 3 days together being oriented. But the truth of the matter is that if we know that these highly advanced marketing mechanisms, these highly advanced data gathering systems and sophisticated models by which tuition, discounts, scholarships, and need-based financial aid are given out, that just makes us better at helping students guide to the right types of schools. Okay, so that's the overall, big picture there. Now, on the tactical level, that's where I think it gets really interesting. And this is where you hear a lot of water cooler discussions about, okay, is it early action, early decision? Which one's going to be better for the student? Okay, do we put in financial aid forms or not? Is that a question? Demonstrated interest in the college. Will the college actually track the fact that you called or emailed or went to the admitted students day or whatever the case may be in order to show up on their radar screen? So I think that kind of thing is now being percolated down into the consumer's mindset a little bit. But I don't know about you, Cindy, but I still, have parents that are coming into the office with an old cognitive map, one that was from 25 years ago. Oh, we just put in an application in regular timeline and, we get in or not, that kind of mindset. And that may or may not serve that family well.
So how do counselors, especially, how do we know what colleges are going to, how they're going to look at it, or whether demonstrated interest is a part of that? And, how do we find that information?
Yeah, how do we get that kind of information? Well, sometimes you can kind of see it on the surface, but oftentimes, Cindy, I end up just interfacing with the admissions rep, for that school to ask them a little bit about, hey, what are you guys doing? What programs are you building?
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with a VP of enrollment the other day, and he was like, yeah, we use Ruffalo Noel Levitz. Well, Ruffalo Noel Levitz is the largest strategic enrollment management consulting firm in the country. I think they have about 1,700 that they interface with to build these data-driven models that help them understand who's going to actually show up if they give certain amounts of money, et cetera, et cetera. So when you see those kinds of things, that they are being very intentional about their admissions and enrollment process.
And I think that's really good piece of advice, and that's why talking to people, having representatives come to your school or your office. I have one coming this afternoon. I had one last week. I'm in a little town, so that's definitely something that makes a big difference. One of the other things that's really monumental this year is the change in the FAFSA, and now it's an earlier application date. What does that mean for seniors applying this year?
Yeah, for seniors. This is really interesting, Cindy. I don't know how it's been for you when you interfaced with your admissions reps, but for a lot of the VPs of enrollment and folks I've talked to, there's a question mark as to how this will all play out, because this is the brand new early FAFSA. Okay. Well, technically, what we're looking at here is that, last year the federal government came out and said, listen, we don't have enough first gen and underrepresented families finishing the financial aid process. So in effect, what we would like to do is bring back the deadline to October 1st, the opening deadline, I should say, so that families can get into the system earlier, put their data in, and have what's called the data retrieval tool used right away, which is different from years past. Data retrieval, if you haven't played with this, it's an interlink between the IRS tax system and the federal government's financial aid system. So it allows surety on the financial aid office's part to find out, oh, this is actual tax data. They look at that as gold. That is, not just self-reported data. This is something that has gone in through the IRS system. So they really want to see either the data retrieval tool being used or what's called a tax transcript being sent in to assure them that they're packaging financial aid correctly. So all of that can be done instantaneously as you apply this year as a senior. In the class of 17, they can push a button after they fill in their FAFSA, initialize the data retrieval tool, and have all that information in the financial aid office's hands, essentially, at that point, which is really nice. Now, in August, the Undersecretary of Education came out and implored the colleges to please do not move forward your financial aid deadlines, because they were fearing that this is going to cause some unintended consequences in both the admissions and the financial aid cycle, so that everything's creeping to the left, everything's getting earlier and earlier. They don't want that. They want consumers to be able to have essentially 5 months with the financial aid data from hopefully November, December, all the way through May 1st to make a buying decision. This is significant. Last year, if you did regular decision, you applied for financial aid in January, and then you updated your FAFSA once the 2015 taxes were complete, you might have literally weeks to make a final choice for $120,000 or $200,000 educational purchase. So in my little brain, I'm thinking the federal government is not only doing this to help first-gen students get their stuff in, make it more streamlined, and get their process wrapped up right away. It's also putting pressure on the colleges, on the financial aid enrollment side, to put forth their best effort, and then be on the flip side of people bargaining, people appealing, people saying, look, I got a better offer over here. Can you do something about that? And colleges are going to have to withstand that operation for months and months now to May 1st, when they finally make, quote unquote, their class. So it's going to be a very dynamic season, Cindy. I've talked to both kind of scenarios in the colleges where they're saying, we're going to stick to what we did last year. I've talked to a lot of folks that have said, no, we're going to try our best to get out our financial aid offers at the latter part of the first semester. And I think you and I were talking just before we came on that a lot of the smaller mid-tier private institutions will probably be the ones that are right out ahead of the game. Right. And will get their financial aid packages out to students lickety split, because top of mind awareness. They want to get students the information as soon as they can, so that they can have visibility in the minds of the parents and the students. It was interesting, last year at NACAC, there was a presentation that was given, and one of the little notable quotables was an admissions rep saying, we're concerned that a student will get an offer from another college and won't even think about us.
Right.
So we can see the expansion of what, I think some in the Midwest called merit wars. This may start happening during that cycle. I'm just anticipating that. Who knows what's going to happen, but that's just in my mind what's going to come about in this season.
And as I talk to college admissions people, as we said, I'm hearing the same thing. I know a lot of schools that are going to try and package earlier because they will bring them up to the top, and to find out in December and not have to wait until April is a huge momentum. It makes a huge difference. But it sounds like it's okay. Which came first? It's a chicken or the egg? Along with having an October 1 deadline, now in order to get those taxes, you're using 2-year-old taxes basically, instead of your most current ones. So did the October 1 deadline necessitate having to do early taxes, or, which came first?
Yeah, I think the other thing, Cindy, with that, the early taxes, 2015 is going to be used twice, basically. So the class that just graduated, class of 16, used the 15 data. The class of 16, as they matriculate up into their sophomore year, they're using the same data again. What's really interesting is what is happening with families that lost a job. Mm-hmm. What is happening with families that are low income, that are hourly workers and shifted jobs to lower paying jobs, or there are a lot of different extenuating circumstances that have to do with income, which is the only thing that's showing up from data retrieval. Asset-based information is not part of data retrieval. So it's really important to know that I think the colleges are going to be faced with a deluge of appeals, but only if the family knows that they can appeal based on some of these things. So I wouldn't say a very high percentage of my families I'm serving, Cindy, are in an appeal situation, but across the socioeconomic spectrum, there are a handful. I have a person in Houston I'm working with who they went half-time. Another person shut down or was laid off from a $200,000 plus a year income job. Now she's starting a consulting business from scratch. So the college isn't going to see that unless someone raises their hand and say, listen, what you see on the 2015 taxes is no longer true. Those appeal letters are really important to get in. And then the question is when to send them. Should we send them in October? Do we send them in November? Do we wait until we get all the financial aid stuff in hand in March and send it there? I'm biasing in my own practice earlier. I want the financial aid folks to see as much of true to form data as we can possibly give them up front. So if someone were to ask me, when would you position that appeal? I would say right up, as soon as you file, go ahead and put in the appeal. So that's what I'm doing at least.
And I think that brings up a really good point. A lot of colleges don't like to promote appealing. It's like we very rarely give changes, or it has to, they don't want the negotiation, the bargaining thing.
Right.
But there are, with 2 years, there are a lot of changes that can happen. And they, as part of this, they do have to have that opportunity, because otherwise it'll leave those families that this is designed for totally out. So
Out.
yeah.
Right.
So.
And I think that, it was interesting. I went to an FSA conference, not this past one, but the one before. And there was an aid administrator who got up to talk with whoever was speaking at the podium about how they had been shifted from doing verification, where a record gets flagged for having a piece of data that was questionable or whatnot. That person's job got shifted from that to doing the actual appeal process. Mm-hmm. So that I think a lot of colleges are anticipating this added throughput. They know that they're going to have a lot of these questions up front, with families saying, hey, 2015 was a banner year, it's no longer the case, or right. Many other reasons for appeals as well. But it's all part of it, part of the new system.
Well, it's exciting to be a part of this and be part of this change, and see its history in the making. So I think it's an exciting time to be a counselor.
Oh, I agree.
In closing, what any other part of wording advice would you give to our counselor?
I think the thing is this, and this is my own brain here. Affordability is really part of fit. I think that is out on the street, but we as counselors, I think, have to embrace it more and more. I was very lucky in the fact I had a finance background, and some training there. But if we don't have that, it's important to dig into these things where 10 years ago, 15 years ago, independent counselors and school counselors might have shied away from financial aid and all discussions of finance with family. I think we need to get in the trenches now and work with that and let that influence college lists. Yes, I think we need to get very educated on things like CLEP, dual credit courses, articulation agreements with community college, 4-year routes. All sorts of other routes are going to start opening up, Cindy. I was talking with a colleague the other day where Texas A&M is starting an agreement with Austin Community College to bring students over from Austin to College Station. There's all these things that are sprouting because people are concerned about affordability. So if I had any piece of advice, is to try to get with families and really have open and honest conversations about what is the budget. What are your college dollars doing? What goal do you have as a student? What goal do you have as a parent? And let that help guide that admissions process and that college list.
I think that's really good advice and prudent advice. College has become the highest investment families often make. So we wouldn't make any other investments without knowing more about it and having some guidelines and consideration. So thank you, Mike. This has been great.
Thanks, Cindy.
Awesome. Good rest of your fall. I know it's been a very busy season, so thank you for taking time. And
absolutely, Cindy.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.